Story 1. There was an incredible independent film I saw at a festival in Portland in 2006. It was about a time-traveling mailman, and the only copy was lost when the director's hard drive crashed. I have spent years trying to track down anyone who might have seen it. Story 2. The local television advertisements my parents created for their fabric shop in the 1980s featured my dad with big shoulder pads and a businessman's perm jumping out of rolls of fabric. I would love to see those now. Story 3. Saved from the Titanic, 1912. It was the first Titanic movie told from a survivor's perspective, but it was lost in a fire. Story 4. I would bring back the original cut of Stanley Kubrick's The Aryan Papers. I am curious to see what it could have been. Story 5. The Valley of Fear, silent film, 1916. Little is known about it, but this lady was Eddie, Ivy, or possibly a combination of both. Daisy Burrell. Story 6. The old Barbie website and games were enjoyable. Along with that, the Lego Barbie Dreamhouse game was fun to decorate everything. Story 7. If I could recover just one lost medium, it would have to be the Library of Alexandria. Imagine thousands of scrolls containing the accumulated knowledge of ancient civilizations, including science, philosophy, medicine, and literature, all lost. If it had survived, the course of human history might have been completely different. We could be centuries ahead in understanding ourselves and the universe. Story 8. I would love to bring back the original unaired pilot of Firefly with the first actress who played Inara. The show is already a masterpiece, but I am so curious to see how that version would have played out. Story 9. When I was living in Harlem during the peak of the pandemic, my phone case broke, so I took it off. I set it on my desk while on a work call in our 1,000 square foot third floor walk-up with my 4 kids homeschooling from Kentucky. The phone slipped off the desk and shattered. I needed to read a text on it, so I attempted to log in, but the damage was too severe. I put it in my car, hidden, to remind myself to take it to the Apple Store after I had locked myself out of it. I had never backed it up, and it contained thousands of photos and videos of my kids. I would ask politely for that camera rollback. The pictures were mostly of my kids, even though I referred to them as me and my kids. I rarely appeared in the now-gone photos. Maybe if I get a job with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I can create a false complaint about myself and find my own pictures again. Story 10. Under the Others. The film created by the Institute of Sexology to advocate for the legalization of homosexuality. Story 11. The 1956 Eurovision Song Contest was the first ever contest, and apart from the winner's footage, it was not recorded on film. Fans have been able to watch every other contest except for 1964, which was also lost. However, we only have an audio recording of 1956. I would love to be able to watch it. Story 12. The original unabridged copy of the Tanakh, also known as the Old Testament, would be archaeologically fascinating. Story 13. The original Star Wars movie as it played in theaters, possibly the version where Jabba the Hutt was portrayed as a human before edits were made for Han Solo to awkwardly move over the tail. Story 14. Putnam's Prairie Emporium was a children's show filmed in my area. After they finished filming the last episode, they dismantled the set and removed it from the studio along with the master tapes and set everything on fire. Copies must exist. A children's channel aired the show years later. One actor shared some of it on YouTube, but only what he salvaged from the fire. Story 15. My old MySpace profile has been upgraded and switched so many times that it is probably all gone. I went back in 2015 and spent an hour trying to access it, but it used an old Hotmail account that I also can't recover. I would love to see what I was up to back in the day. Story 16. My first attempt at writing a novel was when I was 12 years old. I lost it during a computer crash before cloud storage was available. It was probably terrible, but I remember feeling proud of those 50 pages of pure middle school drama. Story 17. I made a video called Please Don't Die sometime in 8th or 9th grade where some friends, my brother, and I found the most creative ways to rock each other. We named it that because my mom would say it whenever she saw what we were doing. We'd run full speed into someone while holding a yoga ball and smash into them, and they'd just rocket away. That was one of our safer stunts. At some point, I drop-kicked my friend into a frozen pond. The ice wasn't as thick as we thought, and I forgot about momentum and went in with him. Don't trust kung fu movies to be realistic. Kids, if that doesn't indicate how reckless we were back then, I don't know what could. We cut together enough 5-second clips of our stunts to play in the Hall of the Mountain King by Edvard Grieg. It was the perfect song to accompany it. The stunts became more dangerous as the song built up. It was ideal. I finally showed it for my film project, and at the end, I was asked to make about 20 to 30 DVD copies by classmates. I even got requests from upperclassmen. But after I got home and before I bought a roll of blank DVDs, my brother tried editing for the first time ever and somehow cut the whole thing. Lost forever. What an idiot. Not the end of the world, though. At least I got an A on my project. I took a lot of hard hits with nothing to show for it. But I can live with that. At least nobody died. Story 18. Paul Mooney's 2005 BET Awards set featured jokes about Diana Ross's DUI. It appears that this content has been removed from the internet. Story 19. Abraham Lincoln's lost speech was so passionate and moving that everyone in attendance gave up trying to write it down. They were too mesmerized. Another possible explanation is that it was so powerful that many, including Lincoln, became convinced it would harm the Union and agreed not to repeat it. Either way, I cannot begin to imagine what he said. I would like to know. Story 20. Shakespeare's lost plays include Cardenio and, if it really existed, Love's Labour's Won. Story 21. Any videos or photos of the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy are not available. We only have photos and videos from before and after the event, but nothing from during the assassination. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I believe this is an important piece of history. Story 22. All the old episodes of MTV's True Life are available for streaming. Some newer seasons from the 2010s are also available, but they are not very good, and only a few episodes can be found elsewhere. I bet many of the subjects are relieved they are not accessible. Story 23. The last small conversation I had with my dad while he was in the hospital before he passed in 2011, I was recording some family history he had remembered. I lost it when my phone was upgraded. The history wasn't as important as hearing his voice again. Story 24. The lost poems from the epic cycle of the Trojan War. There were 12, and once upon a time, they were known to every educated Greek. Today, only 2 survive, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The other 10 are known to us only through a plot summary. Story 25. Jack of All Trades, the period comedy show starring Bruce Campbell. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it, but online sources confirm it did exist. However, no physical copies seem to be available. Story 26. Picture I took of a beautiful little village called Newton Ferrers. I took a picture over the water towards Nos Mayo on a beautiful summer's day. Story 27. Louis C.K.'s version of Putty Tang had some potential to be funny, but the movie ultimately failed. Louis was fired during the editing process, and another individual was brought in by the studio to improve the film. Story 28. The last voicemail from my late husband. He called me while I was driving home from work, maybe a week before he died, and I hadn't answered. So he left me a short, silly voicemail, basically saying, "Fine, don't talk to me. I don't care," with him laughing at the end of it. In the month or so after his death, I listened to it repeatedly. I was not aware, but apparently my voicemail had an auto-delete feature after a certain time or volume, and I lost it. I tried calling the phone company to help me recover it, but they couldn't. Story 29. Ben Jonson's The Isle of Dogs was so controversial that allegedly every copy was destroyed. I would love to read it and find out why it upset so many people. Story 30. There was a children's book I read as a kid where the protagonist would gain superpowers based on the food he ate. He ate carrots and suddenly had X-ray vision. I don't remember much else, but I recall it being good for a child. I also remember reading a book that theorized that dinosaurs became extinct due to a contagious disease that spread across all of Pangaea. Story 31. Inspector Deck's first album was lost in a flood. He could have been one of the best if he hadn't had such bad luck. Story 32. Heartbeat in the brain. I am fascinated by the heartbeat in the brain and feel the need to observe it. I know it exists. Story 33. Not an absolutely necessary piece of media for humanity, but in light of the 1983 Thomas the Tank Engine pilot being released, I would love to see the original pilot for The Sad Story of Henry, made by the BBC in 1953. Story 34. I lost a White Zombie CD over 20 years ago. I had the case for years afterward but never found the disc itself. I'm still baffled by it. I know I didn't loan it to anyone, and I was single and living alone at the time. It just disappeared. Story 35. Alexandria's library is nearing completion, along with the full Epstein files. Story 36. The dictaphone tape contains the voice of my grandfather, who passed away 2 years ago. We managed to play it once and heard it, but then the dictaphone stopped working. Story 37. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Research was a prominent establishment in Germany during the 1930s. Hirschfeld was a pioneering sexologist and an advocate for the LGBTQ community, focusing on issues related to homosexuality, transgender identities, and intersex topics. In 1933, the institute was destroyed by the Nazis, and Hirschfeld died in exile in 1935. This leads me to wonder if his research had survived, whether public understanding of the LGBTQ community would be improved, potentially resulting in less fear and prejudice, particularly towards the transgender community. Story 38. My brother's poker buddy had a band with 2 albums that are absolutely solid from Long Beach. I had them on an old computer and a CD, but I lost both. I'm pretty sure the band doesn't exist anymore. Story 39. The group photo that my cohort and I took outside the institute on the day we started our doctoral studies. There is a printed copy displayed in the student lounge of which I have a photo, but the original has sadly been lost. Story 40. They used to air a show like Star Search on a public access channel in Chicago in the early 2000s. A woman came on one time and performed an original song, and it has been in my head for about 20 years. I would love to watch any of the old recordings of that show. Story 41. There is a small town band I know called The Kin. They have disbanded and the members have moved on to different projects. Their first album was called Tracing, and it is amazing. I used to have it. Now there is maybe 1 copy sold on a questionable website, but it is not available for sale in the United States. Story 42. I'm sure there are better suggestions, but for me, a clean version of Send Love Through from the 1983 film Rock and Rule is ideal. It's a beautiful song, but the original records were destroyed in a fire. This version is the cleanest that someone made by removing as much from the scene it played in as possible. Story 43. My sisters and I used to make music videos with whatever neighborhood kids were around at the time. I remember falling off a cement truck while holding a guitar and singing Picture to Burn by Taylor Swift. All of those videos would be amazing. My sister insists the tapes are somewhere. Story 44. Michelangelo's papers. On his deathbed, he had a bonfire where he burned his lifetime of drawings and sketches. Those papers would have been amazing. On a side note, Leonardo da Vinci had an estimated 13,000 notes, sketches, and writings, of which more than half are now lost. Story 45. The films of pioneering surgery taken by my first wife's mother when she was a medical photographer in Liverpool should have been preserved, but she did not think they were worth anything to anyone. Story 46. My grandfather was in one of the first rock and roll bands in my area in the early 1950s. Because only about 25 people had electric guitars and talent at that time, he did a lot of studio and performance work until he went to the Korean War. However, he never kept any of his vinyl records. My dad and I have found a few people who held on to them, and we listened a few times. I would love to track down everything and give it a listen. Story 47. Aeschylus's lost play about Achilles and Patroclus includes a few snippets. Plato mentioned in his Symposium that he believes Aeschylus misrepresented their dynamic, suggesting that Patroclus was actually the dominant one. A friend informed me about this missing play, noting one fragment features Achilles speaking about kissing Patroclus's thighs. I can't simply find it and read it. How can I forget something like that? How am I supposed to continue with my life? Story 48. I love how everyone is writing deep thoughts, while I just want to see the video of my 8th grade musical where I was the lead in 1996. Story 49. Sure, there are plenty of ancient texts lost to history due to the various destructions of great libraries and universities, such as Alexandria and Nalanda. For years, I have been trying to find a documentary I watched just once called Warhorse, the Iron Horse, which was about the history of human and horse cooperation in conflicts and warfare. One iconic scene showed the presenter, I think, in full medieval armor doing somersaults from side to side, demonstrating how maneuverable people are in full knight armor, contrary to myths about how armor was difficult to move in. I had already been looking for it for years, and then a movie called Warhorse was released in 2011. Now, whenever you try to search for Warhorse, the Iron Horse, the other film comes up in searches. It's not even on IMDb. Story 50. Back in 2010, I had a hard drive with some Bitcoin on it. Not a lot, but enough. I would love to have that back. Story 51. My high school capstone project required us to create a 10-minute video, but I made an hour and 15-minute mockumentary about a rock band. It involved several classmates, and I went above and beyond with the editing. We burned copies for everyone before graduating, but most of the discs were corrupted. The only functioning copy was taken by an ex-friend when they moved across the country. We attempted to retrieve it or have him burn another copy, but without success. Story 52. The original high-resolution tapes of the Apollo 11 moon landing, recorded in Australia as it was the part of the world facing the moon at that time, were somehow lost or taped over. Story 53. There was a video of my mom at my birthday when I was about 8 years old. It's one of the last memories I have of her that I truly remember. Story 54. I wish I could say something meaningful like others have with the Library of Alexandria, but I want to see the 4-hour cut of Revenge of the Sith. Story 55. The first beta version of Sonic 1 features a unique pose while standing still and a large welcome to Green Hill sign. Story 56. That person who discarded his old hard drive containing Bitcoin searched the landfill for weeks or even months. Story 57. The film I was working on looked gorgeous when my hard drive corrupted about 6 hours before it was to be screened. There was no backup and over a year of shooting footage was lost. I have many regrets and lessons learned. Story 58. The Day the Clown Cried is Jerry Lewis's lost film from the 1970s about a clown in a concentration camp during World War II. It is said to be wild according to the few who have seen it. I believe the only print is locked in a safe somewhere, never to be released. Story 59. The photos I took of my family and our dog just before we headed to the veterinarian to have her put down were special. It was just before Christmas, and we had our yearly Santa photos with all 3 of our dogs scheduled for 3 days later. I set up the camper on the bench, and we all stood in front of our Christmas tree, taking some final photos using the Canon remote control app. They all looked great in the app preview, but little did I know that I had bumped the camera into manual mode. While the previews were perfect, the actual photos were almost entirely black. It was absolutely devastating when I came back a week later to look at the photos. Story 60. Honestly, I would choose the original cut of The Day the Clown Cried by Jerry Lewis. Although it has become somewhat of a meme, the concept of such a bizarre and uncomfortable film being hidden away for decades intrigues me. A tragicomedy about a clown leading children to a concentration camp, directed by and starring Jerry Lewis at the height of his career, sounds either like an unwatchable disaster or a strange masterpiece. Either way, I want to see it. Story 61. The lost picture of William Henry Harrison was taken in 1841 and is the very first photograph of a United States president. Because it is lost, the first surviving picture of a United States president is the photograph of John Quincy Adams taken in 1844. Story 62. The only nude pictures my wife has ever allowed me to take of her were on our honeymoon. She didn't permit me to keep them on my phone as part of the agreement. The external hard drive they were stored on was lost during a move. Despite all her precautions, somewhere there is a moving person looking at those pictures. Story 63. The first song I heard in the car when I was bringing my son home from the hospital was a reggae song I used to hear frequently on 89 FM, the impact of Michigan State University's college radio station. It was about Malawi, and I assumed the band was from there. I have no idea how to find it. Story 64. Preferably the master reel of London After Midnight, but a copy would suffice. Humanity would benefit more from recovering the Library of Alexandria, although few people today would pay attention. Personally, I would love to see this. A close second would be any of the master recordings from pre-war blues artist Charlie Patton. All we have now are copies of pressings, and while they are impressive, the detail in the master recordings would be breathtaking. Story 65. The hard disk of my father, 500 gigabytes of family photos, was damaged because he plugged in the wrong charger while undergoing chemotherapy 16 years ago. The device is now unusable, and recovery services are too expensive. Story 66. Byron's Diary. He requested it be destroyed after his death without being read, and it was ceremonially burnt in front of witnesses in his publisher's fireplace. Story 67. One time, I spent an entire afternoon trying to track down a 1999 independent film about a chess tournament. I managed to find an email address for one of the directors and the Facebook profile of the other. I contacted both and received friendly replies from each. Unfortunately, neither of them has access to the film, and the studio that produced it is defunct, so it doesn't exist anywhere. If I could recover a piece of lost media, it would probably be that film. Story 68. When I was little, I used to play an online game featuring Phineas and Ferb. In the game, you had to dig with a bulldozer to navigate a labyrinth. It was one of their experiments. I only remember this, so I'm unable to find it. Story 69. Either the film Saved from the Titanic, which features a survivor who was lost in a fire, or the remaining photographs Robert Capa took on D-Day, which were lost during printing. Story 70. The play my grandfather wrote about Julius Caesar is fascinating. I never got to meet him, but we supposedly shared many similar interests, including ancient Greece and Rome. Story 71. Easily accessible, high-quality original uncut footage of all the original To Catch a Predator investigations. Story 72. The Lost Apollo 11 Moon Landing Tapes. A friend of mine works for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization and was part of the international team that tried to find the original slow-scan television format tapes. Story 73. A song that no longer exists was called Face Gush Causing Pulmonary Embolism. The first 10 to 15 seconds of the song meant a lot to me, and since it is long, I can't find any song similar to that part of the lost song. Story 74. I would. But first you have to move that cat. Johnny Carson to Zsa Zsa Gabor after she asked, "Would you like to pet my cat?" while holding her cat. Yes, I saw it the day it aired when I was a kid. I'm sure Mr. Carson had it erased, but it did happen. Story 75. My dad used to work with a drummer in a local band back in the 1990s. They made a studio album and gave my dad a copy, which is actually very good. There were probably only 50 copies in existence, and ours went missing at some point. The band was Playground Hero from Victoria, Canada, if anyone is interested. Story 76. A video I would love to see again features a YouTuber on a road trip who encounters a man discussing how great America is. The man sends his son to retrieve the American flag, and then he proudly talks about America and the Confederacy. He worked as a ditch clearer or something similar. There was also a video of a jazz band performing, and among the crowd was an older man with long hair dancing in a rather unusual manner. I have never been able to find that video again. Story 77, The Scooby-Doo Project, a parody of the Blair Witch Project. Some of it is available on YouTube, but the entire production has not yet surfaced. Story 78. I would love to see the storyboard reel for Walt Disney's Hiawatha movie. It was supposedly going to be the most artistic film he would have made after Fantasia. Story 79. I lost a hard drive with some vacation photos in Sweden and Denmark years ago. I would like to see those snapshots again. Story 80. Back in the 1990s, my dad recorded a home video on VHS using his camcorder. It captured the events of a demolition derby we attended when I was a child. My dad also edited in music, featuring 1970s rock and roll songs. The music perfectly matched what he filmed me, him, the fans, and the derby, and it was one of the best quality home videos I've ever seen. In the 2000s, the tape malfunctioned. My dad said it was fixable, but he accidentally let my uncle borrow it. My uncle tried to watch it, became angry, and threw it in the trash without telling us until a week later. My dad and I called the local dump, but it was pointless. It was gone. My dad and I still get angry when we discuss that tape. Story 81. I had 7 friends at my house in my 20s. I used to produce music for fun, and we had a 15-minute freestyle session that was just silly and goofy. 3 of those friends have now passed away, and my laptop with all my music files was stolen. Story 82. People have expressed some amazing opinions, but the original moon landing video would be one of them. We do not have it due to technical issues, and it is believed to be lost or destroyed. Story 83. I'm not a Christian anymore, but it has to be the lost books of the New Testament. For those unfamiliar, there are well-known texts like the Gospel of Thomas that some people want included in the Bible, but they are not. All of Paul's letters that survived are part of the New Testament, and in those letters he mentions other letters. Particularly in 1 Corinthians, he says, "In my previous letter," which implies that a letter titled 0th Corinthians exists somewhere. In Colossians, he says, "Make sure to read this letter aloud in Laodicea, and then read the letter I wrote to them aloud in Colossae," indicating that there is an epistle to Laodicea out there. Unlike texts such as the Gospel of Judas, if anyone were to find the epistle of Laodicea, Christians would have little choice but to include it in the Bible, since it states in the Bible to read that book in church. Story 84. The Press Your Luck episode featuring the $35,000 whammy loss included Neil Flynn as a contestant. Story 85. The missing fragments from the Epic of Gilgamesh. It wouldn't surprise me if we find them eventually, but I would like to be able to read them. Story 86. My grandmother was on The Queen for a day television show in the 1950s. It was an early version of reality television where housewives would share their stories, and one of them would win prizes and receive a crown. My grandmother won, and I eventually inherited the china cabinet she received as one of the prizes, which is how I learned about her television appearance. I have never been able to find the episode in which she appeared. I read that the film from many of the older episodes was lost in a fire at one point. It is a shame because it would have been nice to hear my grandmother's voice and to listen to her talk about our family for a little bit. I am told it was truly one of her happiest days when she won the prize on that show. Story 87. The 18.5-minute gap in the Nixon tapes occurred on June 20th, 1972. This was the first recorded conversation between President Nixon and Chief of Staff Haldeman after the Watergate arrests. While not crucial to the overall understanding of history, I have always been curious about what was said during that time. Story 88. Peterson's Guide to North American Birds CD is the best bird identification software ever created, but the last operating system it supported was Windows XP. The current bird apps are not comparable to this one. Story 89. I would like to learn about what happened in the Void Century so that I can finish One Piece before Oda does. Story 90. My Pokemon Ruby cartridge has been long lost after a lunch stop on a fishing trip when I was a much younger lad. Story 91. I found my mother's old Word documents discussing her struggles raising me and the challenges she faced. She wrote a story called The Chameleon, which was about changing your colors so much that you forget who you originally were or if you even have your own color at all. It was just a document on an old computer. I wish I could go get it, but she doesn't even know I read it. Story 92. When the movie iRobot was released, there was a website that featured a series of iRobot Flash games. One game was a top-down shooter where you had to survive against a heavy flow of robot attacks. That site was taken down, and I wish I could play that game again. Story 93. The only picture I have of my mother, who passed away, is becoming harder to remember over the years. Rest in peace, Mom. Story 94. Camcorder videos we made as kids with friends who have since passed away or lost their way. Story 95. I had a video of my 2 little kids many years ago. I heard them laughing in the kitchen, so I went in with the camera. My 1-year-old was naked, and my 3-year-old had covered her with stickers. The 1-year-old had also peed on the vinyl floor and was trying to crawl around but kept slipping, so she wasn't going anywhere. It was absolutely ridiculous, and we were all laughing, the baby laughing because we were laughing. I haven't seen that clip in 20 years, but I'd love to see it again. On the same tape, there was a candid video where I recorded my husband dancing with the 1-year-old while a sweet ballad played on the radio. Story 96. Peter Neubauer's studies on separated twins raise suspicions that it is sealed for reasons beyond being simply unethical. Story 97. London After Midnight is a lost film starring Lon Chaney. People have been searching for it for decades and are willing to pay millions for it. Story 98. I completed a group project in high school. We created a video about the Middle Ages, and I combined footage using a basic home video editor designed for 2 videocassette recorders. Unfortunately, the tape seems to be lost forever. Story 99. The Sanrio Onagai My Melody series is missing an English dub. The subtitles are fine, and it's a great series that introduced Kuromi's character. It aired in the Philippines and is now unavailable. I'm sure Sanrio fans would love to see and hear the English dub. Story 100. There is a bounty for the full episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show, featuring Donald Trump as a guest. He discusses that if he were to run, he would do it as a Republican because they are easily manipulated and how it would be easier. A person has been searching for a copy but cannot find one. It appears to have been deleted from the video archives, so the only way to obtain it would be if someone recorded it on VHS. I can't recall the exact bounty amount, but he has shared details about it on Reddit. Additionally, there is a subreddit dedicated to this r/bounty find this episode. Story 101. There was an interview that my sister and I remember but cannot find anywhere. Count Von Hole really dislikes Paris Hilton for some reason. Feels like we made this up at this point. Story 102. I would love to finally see the cut content from Metal Gear Solid 2. Sons of Liberty, where Arsenal Gear crashes into New York City and knocks down several buildings. Story 103. All the artwork I created between the ages of 10 and 19 was destroyed by my cousin when he thought he wouldn't receive a new MacBook for Christmas. The surprising part is that he actually did receive the MacBook. It was just hidden as a surprise. They still gave it to him despite the tantrum and property destruction. Story 104. The Fox Kids version of Slayers is so fascinating that it almost existed. It is confirmed that at least the first few episodes were re-recorded. Story 105. As macabre as it may be, the Challenger tapes are intriguing. I am curious to discover the protocol they were trying to follow, considering the disaster was caused by a significant oversight in construction. With the permission of the families, I would have every engineer listen to it daily as a reminder of the importance of making sound engineering decisions in processes. Story 106. A video of a birthday party thrown by our family for my cousin and me for our first birthday, which was a week apart. I never got to see it. A few years later, my dad apparently gave it to his brother to have it copied, but it never came back. To this day, it remains an issue between them. I just want to see myself flying about in my walker. Story 107. I would choose a completely lost silent film, perhaps something by Lon Chaney or from the early days of Charlie Chaplin. It would be incredible to see how they crafted those early stories and performances, which represent a significant piece of history. Story 108. There was an entertaining video back in 2008 that I saw called Top 10 Strangest Things on the Planet. And off, too. It was pure comedy by a YouTuber, but I could never find it again. Story 109. I got a few pictures with Les Claypool at a wine tasting in San Francisco. I was one of the only people who recognized him. They were taken on a digital camera, which we used before cell phone cameras became popular and before cloud storage existed. The pictures were stored on the camera's memory, but the camera no longer works. Story 110. Video outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell or the video of the numerous cameras outside the Pentagon on September 11th. Story 111. Original titles from Paramount cartoons before 1948. Paramount sold them for very little in the 1950s for television distribution, and the company that purchased them added their logos. Some original prints have surfaced. However, it would still be nice to have. Story 112. The videos of both my sons being born are lost. I tried to help a friend get his life together when he was struggling with addiction. I provided him with a safe place to stay, but he took the camera and pawned it. The discs were in the bag and are gone forever. Story 113. Saturday Night Live Music A Go-Go features clips from 20 years of Saturday Night Live music, primarily from the mid-90s. It includes smaller comedic clips and some full-length live music performances, such as Whitney Houston singing I'm Your Baby Tonight and Pearl Jam. I had it on VHS. A friend recorded it while we were having drinks, so as the show progressed, there were increasingly more commercials she forgot to pause, which made it even better. I don't know what happened to my VHS, and I can't find it online. Story 114. That person's hard disk drive was lost in a public landfill containing hundreds of billions of dollars in Bitcoin. That storage device. Story 115. Back in 2006, my dad took me and his girlfriend to see a Brad Paisley and Carrie Underwood concert. I remember that before he sang Mud on the Tires, a screen dropped down, and he had a conversation with Tom Otter. Yet, I can't find any information about it online. Story 116. Sam Goldwyn's 1959 Porgy and Bess. I know there's an abridged version floating around, but I'd love to see the complete 2-hour 20-minute cut, restored or not. Story 117. That's a tough one. I would choose a lost episode of a show that shaped my childhood. Something that has been erased from history. What about you? What is your holy grail of lost media? Story 118. The hit song Boys in the Bright White Sports Car is supposedly based on a late 1970s to early 1980s gum commercial. I remember it, but I can't find it. It has no real value, but the satisfaction is worth it, and I would still use my turn to enjoy it. Story 119. The source for the New Testament. There are passages in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke that mirror each other but do not appear in the earlier Gospel of Mark. This has led to the hypothesis that they drew upon a second, earlier source that has not survived, possibly due to being part of an oral tradition. Finding this missing source would be a significant archaeological and theological discovery. Story 120. Okay, this may sound shallow compared to many great answers, but here it goes. I want to see the Lost Unit B footage from Event Horizon. I heard the completed film would have made more sense, but the Unit B footage was so bizarre and unusual that it was deemed unreleasable. There are legends that they actually found the lost footage in a salt mine, but it remains unreleased. Story 121. The family camcorder that was stolen belonged to a person I used to know. It contained the only tape of his grandmother holding her great-grandchildren. I have not seen or spoken to him in 18 years, but I would want that for him and his family. Story 122. Probably minor in the grand scheme of things, but my late grandmother's voicemails are missed. At some point years ago, Apple did an update that auto-deleted old voicemails with no recovery option. She had just died, and I was keeping them in mourning and for memory. Of course, you can change the settings to prevent future deletions, but the ones she left were already gone. She really didn't like having her picture taken, and we were very poor, so she didn't leave anything of value behind. All these years later, I would love to hear her beautiful and kind voice telling me that she loves me. Story 123. Test footage of Bela Lugosi as the monster in Frankenstein from 1931, before he turned down the role and Boris Karloff was cast. The rest is history. Story 124. I would like to know more things. However, this isn't hidden well enough. Cord 1976. Please respond. Story 125. The División del Norte was Pancho Villa's army during the Mexican Revolution and played a crucial role in the outcome of that conflict. An American filmmaker joined the division and filmed a documentary capturing footage of life in the division and of Pancho Villa. This film was lost, and it is a real tragedy. The history of the Etruscans is significant. They were a civilization that neighbored Rome and were ultimately conquered. Before he became emperor, Claudius was an accomplished historian, and he wrote an extensive history of the Etruscans. Unfortunately, that text is lost. This not only means we know less about the Etruscans than we would like, but we also lost a document written by one of Rome's earliest emperors. Story 126. Back when WebShots was a website, there was a woman named Allison who posed in a photo on a beach in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with women named Tiffany and Katie. They were part of a showstoppers group. All three were white women. Allison was wearing a hot pink bikini, and she had one of the largest butts I've ever seen on a torso that small. She had the upper body of a track star and the lower body of a hairless bison. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.